Okay.
Hello, Unify Women Network. I feel so privileged to be here with all of you as a sister in the theme of sisterhood on this International Women's Day. My name is Sheva Kar, and I am coming to you representing Operation Big Sister, a feature film narrative documentary and also a multimedia project designed to contribute to the ending of human trafficking worldwide. And I have a special guest here with us that I'm going to introduce you to in a moment. But in theme with today's slogan with Unify and Women Network, Better Together, I want to share a story that inspires me about how we truly are better together from our sisters in Iceland. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able here to share with you a picture. Can you see the picture, Gudrun?
Not yet. Now I can see it, yes.
I realize this picture is a little bit hard to see. All those little blobs that you see in between the buildings are people. They are people who gathered in Iceland on October 24th, 1975, when 90% of the Icelandic sister population went on strike, refusing to do any work at their homes or their jobs. It was the largest demonstration in the nation's history and shut down the entire country. The following year, in response to this demonstration of solidarity, Iceland's parliament passed a law guaranteeing women equal pay. 4 years later, Iceland elected the world's first female president. And today, Iceland has the highest gender equity in the world. This collective act of courage led the way for Operation Big Sister. And there in the midst of the crowd that day was a young woman, I believe in her 20s. Is that right, Gudrun?
Oh, yeah.
A young woman named Gudrun Jónsdóttir, who is with us today as the founding Big Sister. Gudrun, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Tell us about Operation Big Sister.
Well, it's a long story. In 1982, we opened the Women's Shelter in Reykjavik, where women got for the first time a place where they defined their lives themselves, and they started to look at their personal lives in a social context, in a political context. And it was a major surprise to realize about all the violence that was going on in our society. And when they got this place to talk, they started to tell all kinds of stories that none of us imagined could be true. They started also to talk about incest and rape. And little by little, we found out that we had to respond, and we opened Stígamót in 1990. And we worked for 10, 15 years with women that had been raped or subjected to incest. And again, when women got the place to define and discuss their lives, some of them told us about becoming drug addicted and the way they used to finance their abuse, which of course was to sell their bodies. And we learned the hard way that prostitution is part of sexual violence. And little by little, women started to come, and then there was this explosion in the pornographic world in Iceland in the year 2000, and we got 13 strip clubs, so-called strip clubs. And when we visited the strip clubs, we found out what was going on. They were actually brothels selling access to women, many of them trafficked from poorer countries, for instance, from the Baltic. And the women found their way to Stígamót. And little by little, we started to fight trafficking, and we opened a shelter for trafficked women. And we fought for to change the law, for better services and raising consciousness. And actually we managed to change the law so that men who buy women in prostitution are now criminalized in Iceland, but not the women. And for us, it was a major victory, and we thought that women could live happily ever after. We had done the work. But it showed that there was a huge resistance within the police, and the politicians didn't have the guts to implement the law. So 3 years after we got the law, none men had been sentenced for buying women. We had this flourishing prostitution going on, and at the same time we were running shelter for trafficked women. So we knew really, we really knew about the problem and how huge it was, and nobody was reacting to it. And after doing all the things that good girls do, after trying whatever we did by ordinary ways, we thought it was time to try something different. So in the beginning, we wanted to frighten men away from buying women. We knew that prostitution can't flourish in the daylight. It has to happen so that the buyers can be anonymous and get away with buying women. So we decided to play by their rules and go underground and find out what was going on. So we put in ads at the right web pages in the newspapers where everything was going on. And just half an hour or an hour after we put in an ad, we got 50 or hundreds of men wanting to buy us. And the younger we looked, the more popular we were. And in the beginning, we answered to them when they wanted to buy us, and when we had got their names. Don't you know that buying women in Iceland is criminal? Big Sister is watching you. And we had been doing this for a time, and we were getting bored, and we were playing around. I don't know if I have time to tell about all what we were playing around. And then we decided we have to use this. We have gotten their names. And we decided to have a press conference. And we collected more than 100 names and emails and unrecorded phones. And we decided that we had to be anonymous because we wanted to frighten them away. And also because part of us, we were 85 women, many of us public figures. They had all kinds of public professions, and so we sought customs which we called burkas. So we were anonymous. 3 of us went to the police stations and handed over the names of the Icelandic men buying prostitution. And then we went to the press conference, and at the press conference, we...
and this, by the way, are the burkas. Here they are.
Yes, those are the burkas. This is the press conference. And there we demanded what needed to be done. And we played some of the phone calls where we were selling our bodies, and one of the horrible women taking part sent out an invitation from what she called the Icelandic Model Agency to all the buyers. And she invited them to a receptions, which happened to be at the same time and at the same place as the press conference, where she promised them that they could meet very interesting women, beautiful women. So they were actually invited to the press conference also. During our operation, Big Sister, one of the women was getting bored, and she said, "Why are we doing this, sisters?" And we were chatting on the internet, and one of us reminded her, "Don't you remember that the head of police had repeatedly said on TV that they neither have police force or money to investigate prostitution, so we are helping them?" Well, she said, "Then let's help them." So she started to send her buyers right to the home of the head of police with all kinds of stuff like that. The buyers were supposed to get to all kinds of odd places, and they always were supposed to have a newspaper which sold prostitution under their arm. And then there were women on stakeouts filming them. And yeah.
Gudrun, I think it's worth saying that one of the things that made this work and successfully destabilize the violence against women in the form of sex trafficking in Iceland is the anonymity of the Big Sisters, and how this effort actually grew through a viral campaign that in Iceland they affectionately call the Jungle Telegraph.
Yeah, that's
kitchen
true.
table to kitchen table. That Gudrun, this began with Gudrun and one of the graduate students working with her at Stigamont. Mm-hmm. And gradually the women started hearing that these other women were doing this, and of their own accord, without even talking to each other, began to take out their own ads in the newspaper and sell themselves and say, "This is your big sister watching you. Didn't you know what you're doing is illegal and violent and immoral and harming women?" And so men, when they would seek prostitution, wouldn't know if they were actually by accident going to get their sister or their wife or their girlfriend or their mother on the phone. Exactly. And so the anonymity of the Big Sisters was part of the brilliance of the campaign and how they maintained that at the press conference in the burqas. And this story has so much richness to it. And when I tell people we're creating a Hollywood feature film that is a comedy about human trafficking, that unto itself is such a cognitive dissonance. But the humor and the joy and the playfulness with which this was done, and successfully to destabilize a form of violence against women in an entire country, we do want to share with you just briefly some of the tangible results that came out of this Big Sister operation, which is still underway. And so we have just this slide. Gudrun, do you want to share in your own voice what these results were?
Yes, I could do that. When it was made public at the press conference, we got the whole media to show up, and that really forced the police to do their work. So suddenly, a few weeks later, the police got 25 million to investigate prostitution, and suddenly they got also more than 100 customers that were reported for buying women. Also, little by little, the strip clubs were closed down. But of course, we had many other actions too to do that. Yeah, you mentioned the Snow Conference. That happened before, when the porn sites on the internet, their network had planned a huge conference in Iceland, which they had to cancel because of the pressure from here. I think another important part was to use media, to call the whole media, and to, when one of them showed up, the others had to be there too. And when it was in media, it was such a pressure on politicians that they had to really to react.
This story has so much to it, and the brilliance of women coming together and doing things better together in an innovative way that was playful and fun is part of the genius of our collaborative sisterhood, because human trafficking is on track to become the largest illicit industry in the world, surpassing the drug trade and the arms trade combined. Jimmy Carter has called this the greatest tragedy in the history of humankind. So when we deal with human trafficking at the United Nations and on the ground, it's a very sober, devastating issue. And the burnout in social workers who are working in this endeavor and to end human trafficking is the turnover and burnout and secondary trauma is vast. And so the Big Sisters, collaborating together with cheeky humor and fun, found a way to meet this devastation and violence with joy. And we look forward, Gudrun, to sharing your story, not just here, which is kind of our first launch of sharing the Operation Big Sister story, but in the feature film that's in development now. Thank you so much, Gudrun, for being my hero and role model in what's possible in sisterhood. And thank you all for participating in Global Sisterhood. Together in sisterhood, we can do good. Anything else you want to say as closing remarks, Gudrun?
Yeah, maybe the magic tool is the jungle telegraph, that we already have found each other, and if we have an exciting and important project or task, we just have to click our fingers and women will show up. So I think this is very little me, but the grassroots of Icelandic women that has been the magic tool.
I love it. So all of you at Women Network, you now have a new way to describe Women Network, the Jungle Telegraph. Thank you all. I celebrate Women's Day with you and our power together as women.